In this video, I'm going to show you how I make a quilt start to finish. It's a gift quilt for Christmas for the son of a friend of mine, and it's going to have applique and an appliqued name, an appliqued boat, and some wavy quilting in it. And I'm going to show you how I make it. It's one of 4 quilts that I'm making for young people in my life. And although I might do the others in stages, I thought I'd actually try and finish one just to gauge how long it's going to take me. I'm recording this in mid-September, so I'm starting early for once so that I can enjoy the process. There are some bits that will need to be hand stitched. For instance, I always hand stitch my binding, and I'm about to go on a little holiday, so I might take that with me. So here I am, just sketching out roughly what I'm going to do for each quilt, but I'm actually just going to show you one of them today. This is the marine fabric that I'm going to use for the undersea part of the quilt, and it so happened that I found that some fabrics in my stash were going to do for the wavy quilting that was going to represent the waves on top. Instead of putting up these into strips for the wavy quilting, I tend to call it wavy quilting, but it's really wavy patchwork because it is just patches of strips of fabric sewn together. I've made a couple of other videos where I do this, and I will link those in the description. I make a wavy bag and some wavy table toppers and things like that. This is the first time that I've actually incorporated it into a quilt. The other videos do go into more detail about the technique. I've got my own way of doing it. I think quite a lot of people who do wavy patchwork cut the strips into wavy shapes first. I don't do that. But I do go into quite a lot of detail about how I do it in the other videos. So take a look at those. So the thing I'd want to say about this stage of the process is that I've started out with a base fabric which I chose for my theme, and in order to add the elements that I want to this quilt, I have found that the fabrics in my stash do match these colours. So initially I thought I might need to get some blending fabrics that would pick out these colours, but actually I found that I had them in my stash, and that's good because I'm making 4 quilts and I don't want to have to buy a lot more fabric than what I've already bought. So this purple, which is not a favourite fabric, I bought several meters of this, and thinking that it was quite a soft, more like this, a soft flowing fabric cotton, and it's not. It's harsh, quite harsh, but in small amounts in this quilt it'll be fine. And so I've made wavy quilting, but not attached to a block like this. So this is a new journey for me, and I'm just going to go for it. And I think sometimes when you're making quilts and you're not sure what you're going to do, sometimes you do just have to jump in with both feet, which is what I'm doing today. So this aquamarine sort of green blue colour here is something, again, it's the same fabric as that purple, and I don't love it. I love the colour, but I don't love the feel of the fabric. But it does exactly pick out some of the aquamarine highlights in this print here. So I'm going to just add it and go with it and trust that it's going to work. So this purple and violet fabric, blue, purple and violet, is from my Penrose quilt. So, and I do think that the colours do blend. So it's obviously meant to be. And this glittery blue, so this is something also, I won't say it's left over from my Penrose quilt because I haven't finished my Penrose quilt yet, but this is one of the fabrics from the Penrose quilt, and it so happens that it does go, it does match, so I'm adding that in as well. Where you have a join like this here, you can add in your next fabric, and it doesn't have the length of the piece doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't matter. But when you join in your next fabric and you overlap that raw edge there, so do a few stitches and then find your raw edge here and just pull your fabric across and make sure that you're going to cover that raw edge. And then come back onto your existing fabric. There's the raw edge there, so I'm anticipating and coming shy of it here. And now start to draw back out, because we do want to have our wavy design, but also we don't want to make it so difficult that you're not making advantage of the width of fabric you've already used. So make sure you once you've covered over a raw edge like that, make sure you come back straight out as soon as you can to get the width. So take the work out and we'll press and see where we are. So already I'm seeing that something that I thought was going to be really difficult is actually starting to work. So I finished doing the wavy quilting at the top of the marine fabric. I just need to cut a piece of the starry sky now. Now, I've never done wavy quilting before, where I've then attached it to a piece of other fabric that isn't wavy quilted. So I've normally made an entire piece and then made something with it. So I'm going to need to sew that in appropriately down there. I'll just do it right sides together and fold in the curves. That should be fine. Like this. Now, I did think that I would need something else on this starry bit, and so I'm going to have a sailboat paper pieced. I've bought a pattern. This is from jojuneandmay.com. Bought that from on Etsy, and I've just looked at how to do it and I think I can manage it. But I'm spurred on by having seen some of the fabrics glow in the dark, and I'm getting quite excited about this project now because the first quilt's coming together, and I do think they are going to look rather special once they're made up. So I've got my, see at the bottom here, I've got my, I'm thankful that I'm going to have a big portion of this that doesn't need quilting. So I'm going to have that much, because I've got my template on the floor, which has gone beyond the bounds of where the camera is. I am a bit short of space at the moment, so I will cut this piece for the sky. The sea creatures at the bottom, got my little bit of wavy quilting, I've got the planets at the top, not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, and then this paper piece boat is going to be going on the waves, and the child's name is going probably around here, fill in the sky a little bit more. Right, so it's called Sailing Yacht Foundation Paper Piecing Pattern from jojuneandmay.com. I'll put a link in the description. No connection to me at all. I just looked for a boat template. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know I'm not very artistic. I'm very good at drawing things, so I thought it'd be easier to get a template ready done, thinking it would be just applique, i.e. make the pieces, applique them on. It's not, it's paper piecing, but I've looked at there's a video to help you, and I think I can do it. So what you need to do it is your fabrics to make your boat. I've got a selection here. I've realised they need to be quite light, stand up against the dark blue, and here goes. Although this is an absolutely lovely paper piecing pattern for a quilt block, after cutting out lots of pieces and making a real complete mess of it, actually, I followed the video and I still struggled a little bit. And I realised that one of the reasons I was struggling was because I was going to be putting this boat onto some background fabric. And a lot of those pieces there are background fabric, because obviously it's a block, not applique. So I realised I was once again, I was making life very difficult for myself. So I had a bit of a change of plan. So sail away on a quilting journey with me, dear friends. This is upside down at the moment, but you see me struggling with that template, and partway through trying to do the first few pieces, not only did I realise that I was absolutely terrible at it, but also I was trying to put in the background pieces because, of course, this is intended as a quilt block, whereas actually I want to do applique, and I didn't really realise that. So I was making a huge amount more work for myself by having to splice in the background, which then I would be putting on that background. And okay, it's a very forgiving print, but it was an unnecessary step. So at about 11 o'clock last night, I decided to just cut out the pieces for the ship. So the brown bit for the boat part, and cut out the sail pieces. I'm going to freehand the mast, and of course it's going to be the other way. This is just how I happened to lay it out last night, and it's going to be sitting on the waves. And so then I'm going to make the flags myself as well, the little flags at the top, because they're tiny and I do actually want those to be a bit bigger. So I've used the template, but not how intended. So my drawing skills aren't good enough to be able to do something like that freehand. I could probably copy it from a picture, but I'm just not that good at drawing. So I'm going to now cut this out in the pieces of fabric that I want. And I must say I find it much easier to keep track of it that way as well. And then I'm going to attach them all to lightweight fusible interface and applique them in the way that I normally do. And what I'll be doing is cutting a fairly narrow strip, about that wide, of my background fabric so that it's easier for me to work with it underneath the sewing machine needle. And I'm going to finish this now before I assemble the quilt, and I'm really glad that I decided to look at the applique before I did, because the boat part, the brown bit, needs to go on the waves, but I'm joining the waves to the stars. So I'll put that in, then I'll put the sails and everything on the star bit, and then I'll attach the two together, if that makes sense.
Sure how this was going to turn out, and my original plan had to be changed to change this to applique from a block. I'm actually really quite pleased with how that's going to turn out. So these stars are glow in the dark, so I'm getting quite excited about how they're going to look peeping through the fabric. All I need to do now is attach these two pieces together in a wave, making sure that the boat is underneath there, and the top's nearly finished. I've got the section with the masts and sails of the ship attached to the lower section of the boat, which is attached to the waves. So that enabled me to applique the waves, the sails, without having too big a piece of fabric to handle. I've then sewn that to, you might not be able to see, but I've sewn that to another piece of the star fabric. And this just was, the sole purpose of this was just to make it easier to get the quilt top into the sewing machine. I've then cut a panel of the planets fabric, and then another panel of the star fabric, and I'm going to put the child's name in applique, and so that's my next step, because before I join those bits up together, I'll applique the letters on so that it's not too difficult to, a same principle, not too difficult to work with a piece of fabric. So that's the next thing I'm going to be doing, is the applique letters. So what I've got here are just pieces I've cut out from paper. So that is Comic Sans font,
size 300 printed actual size on a conventional printer, and same principle as with the pieces of the ship. I do my applique by cutting out the piece of fabric, or cutting out the piece of fabric and putting on fusible interface, or fusing a piece of fabric to the fusible interface and then cutting it out, one or the other. It's another day and I've all but finished the top of my first quilt, so I'm very excited. So the next step for me is to put the layers on the floor, because that's the only space that's big enough to do it, and make my quilt sandwich. And I'm aiming to finish this quilt today. I might not finish the binding, but because I'll be hand sewing some of that, but I'm hoping to get a lot of that done. So I always use this particular batting now. In fact, in the UK we call this wadding. Batting is an American word, but because I've watched so many American quilting videos now, I call it batting as well. I think it's going to give just enough thickness to give it some warmth, especially with this background layer I've got, which is a brushed cotton sheet. I think that will give me just enough to give it some warmth without it being too bulky. So I'll just lay these out. you've enjoyed watching. I'm on the home straight now. I'm just doing the binding. As I say, I'm going to stitch this on with the sewing machine, but I'll be hand stitching it on the back. Once I've done this, I'll actually be ready to show you the quilt. I don't know if you can hear the geese, but that's a real sign of winter coming or autumn coming in this country, because where we are, we're on an estuary and they're Canada geese, and they come down from Scandinavia, which they do in the winter, and they feed here in the winter. And there do seem to be more this year than normal. So what I'm doing now that I've sewn on the binding is I'm just turning it under and pinning it. We're actually going away on holiday shortly for a few days in Cornwall in the UK, and I'm going to take this with me and hand sew the back, but I have now actually finished this quilt. Apart from some finishing off, I need to neaten up some of the lines of stitching, which I'll do by hand, and I need to finish the binding, but the bulk of it is done. So I'm very pleased to have pretty much completed the first, apart from the Penrose quilt, the first of the smaller quilts of the 4 smaller quilts that I'm doing, and to have this one almost done. So I do hope that you'll enjoy watching the other ones as well. I will be finishing them all over the next few weeks, so if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and if you've watched this video and stayed till the end, well done. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear what you think of the quilt. I'm going to show you some shots in a second of it, and also showing the glow in the dark aspect of it. I'd love to know what you think of the fabrics. Just from my point of view, I have really struggled with applique in the past and tried to put it onto a quilt and ended up stopping because I couldn't really do it neatly enough, and so I'm really pleased with my ship. So I'm actually quite pleased with this little quilt, and I've enjoyed sharing it with you.